Thought I would start this morning actually with something I read last night. Um, this is one of my bedtime readings, Dogen's extensive record. It's about, they're short, so, but I thought this somehow struck me as I read it. This is one of Dogen's Dharma talk discourses. Um, and this is number 156. What he says is, if I expound Buddha Dharma as an offering to my fellow practitioners, I cannot avoid my eyebrows falling out, which is a Japanese uh, idea like we have of your nose growing if you lie. So he's saying if he expounds the Dharma, he would be lying to us. Then he says, if I do not expound the Buddha Dharma as an offering to my fellow practitioners, I will enter hell as fast as an arrow. Going beyond these two alternatives, what can I do today, my fellow practitioners, for you? And then after a pause, Dogen said, above the heavens, there is no Maitreya. Below the earth, there is no Maitreya. But seeing his face is superior to hearing his name. If you meet him in person, you cannot be deceived. So that was what I read before I went to bed. So I don't know if I'm lying or going to hell this morning, but we'll try and hit the middle ground between those two. I'm going to start with chapter 17, and let's read the actual text. The first bit of text is from 7, verse 15 to 19. So, reading those verses, starting with 15, you turn your path upon the sacred doctrine, supreme joy and boundless source of bliss. Why delight in mere excitement, in distraction that will cause you misery? Do not be downcast, but marshal all your powers. Make an effort. Be the master of yourself. Practice the equality of self and other. Practice the exchange of self and other. Oh, but how could I become enlightened? Don't excuse yourself with such despondency. The Buddha who declares the truth has truly spoken and proclaimed that if they bring forth strength of perseverance, even bees and flies and gnats and grubs will gain supreme enlightenment, so hard to find. And if by birth and lineage of humankind, I'm able to distinguish good from ill, and do not leave aside the Bodhisattva deeds, why should I not attain the state of Buddhahood? So that's our first group of verses. Before I talk about what the commentaries say, any thoughts about what you read or heard? Okay. Well, let's see what Shantideva has to say. He reflects on the second kind of laziness here, loss of heart, unwillingness to make an effort. Turning our back on the Dharma, we feel too lazy to help ourselves or others. Distracting ourselves with mundane pursuits, we instead move toward the cause of our misery. We do the various things that cause us to lose heart. He then discusses the third type of laziness, the despondency of self-contempt. Honest self-reflection is necessary if we are to free ourselves from confusion and suffering. This self-inquiry is based on respect and kindness for oneself. Without this, the path of awakening can backfire and even fuel our discouragement. Seeing into our past behavior, cliches, and thinking more clearly than we have in the past, we can lead to feelings of guilt and self-contempt. But being caught by these only slows our spiritual journey. So we're not to use these things to beat ourselves up with. We're just to be aware of what we're doing. He offers 3 antidotes for self-contempt. Developing a compassionate relationship with oneself can lead us to a clear-sighted recognition of our shortcomings. The first thing that he tells us to do is marshal all your strength. He asks us to remind ourselves in whatever way is personally meaningful, not to reinforce any thoughts or feelings of unworthiness, using our intelligence, courage, and humor to change the narrative. Remind yourself that your basic nature is unconditionally open and free. We need to remember that our mind is tameable. Trungpa Rinpoche said, whatever happens in the confused mind is the path. Everything is workable. It is a fearless proclamation, the lion's roar. Shantideva's second suggestion is to be the master of yourself, meaning to take responsibility for your own moves. Not seeing oneself as a victim can help us find a way that disrupts the momentum of our discouragement and prevents us from mindlessly doing what we have always done before. His third suggestion is to look at the equality of self and other. One of the ways we do this is to recognize that even if you are burdened by self-contempt, that there are many other people in the world struggling with the same state of mind. And like me, prefer comfort and ease and freedom from guilt and pain. This helps us to look beyond ourselves and open our heart to others. Pema expands on this idea with a discourse on Tonglen, which she calls the exchange of self and other. This is a practice that grows out of Tibetan Buddhism. We start by getting in touch with our own thoughts and feelings. This helps us to see what others are going through. Contacting our own feelings of rage, self-contempt, envy, and whatever, we can realize that these feelings are shared by everyone, leading us to a genuine understanding of other people's distress, a necessary step in the awakening of genuine compassion. If you're feeling angry or despondent, remember that millions of people in the world are feeling exactly as you do. For your sake and theirs, take in the feelings on the breath. Breathe in the feeling with the aspiration that every person feeling this way, including yourself, be relieved of it. Pema tells us that because our basic nature is never altered by worldly confusion and pain, as we connect more profoundly with bodhicitta, the unchanging, non-conceptual openness of our being becomes more accessible. Shantideva takes a further look at self-contempt, feeling that we could never be enlightened or that we have no potential. Shantideva tells us, don't excuse, don't excuse yourself with such despondency. In other words, just because you feel bad, you can't use that as an excuse. Don't indulge in such negative thoughts when you can train in letting them go. Shantideva tells us that human beings have a natural ability to, to know what is harmful and what is helpful. Excuse me. Unlike gnats, bees, and our pets, we can see when we are stuck and when we aren't. We know where our habitual urges lead, and the relief when instead of acting on them, we relax with our immediate experience. If we lose it, we have the tools to recover. We can teach ourselves the Dharma, practice remaining like a log, practice Tonglen, or just relax with the ungraspable energy behind all of the labels and words. We discover that we do have a choice. We can strengthen old habits and suffer, or interrupt them and break free. So that's the commentary on those verses. Any thoughts, any comments on what you heard? Joe.
I always trip over the phrase, just let go. It seems like such an easy thing to tell somebody else. And so I know, to practice mindfulness and awareness, and you see it arising so you can start dealing with it, but it's an oversimplification to say, just let go. I'm wondering, from your background in working with patients like you did through the years,
Mhm.
instead of saying just let go, what would you say to people that were having a problem that was maybe not a real problem, but they were all hung up on it?
It the process is different. So there's not something to say. I probably would do the same thing that you would need to be doing in your head at that point, which is I would be asking as a therapist, what do you questions about why they can't let go? Why are you stuck? What's in the way? What are you thinking about? All of those questions, those are the same questions that you would need to be asking yourself if you say just let go and you can't. I mean, I, perfect example. I mean, in Zazen, there are times when I can just let go. I mean, something's coming up and I can just let go of it. And other times when you can't, but that's when you engage then with why not? What's in my way? What's the obstruction? So I think that's the necessary piece in that. Sometimes you can just let go. You get a distracted thought of, um, oh gee, when I get home, I gotta, oh wait, no, back to my breath, and you just let go. So if it's minor, you can just let it go. If not, then you figure out why you can't. Okay, is that anything else? Yeah, anything else? Okay. Well, let's move on then. The next grouping is 720 to 726. And of course, I took my marker of the book number. Starting at 720, that I must give away my life and limb alarms and frightens me. If so, you say, your terror is misplaced, confused. You fail to see what's hard and what is easy. For myriads of ages, measureless, uncounted, your body has been cut, impaled, burned, torn, for times past numbering. Yet none of this has brought you Buddhahood. The hardships suffered on the path to Buddhahood are limited in their extent and likened to the pain of an incision made to cure the harms of inward ills. And all our doctors cure disease by means of bitter remedies. Likewise, to destroy a vast amount of pain, you should be patient with our little hurts. And yet the Supreme Healer does not use, like them, these common remedies. With ways of extreme tenderness, he soothes away intense and boundless suffering. Our guide instructs us to begin by giving vegetable greens or other little things that later, step by step, the habit once acquired, he may be able to donate our very own flesh. For when we truly feel our bodies are no different from the given herbs, what hardship can there be in giving up, relinquishing our very flesh? An interesting thought. We don't think too much these days about giving up our flesh, I don't think. At least it hasn't crossed my mind in quite a while now. So, let's see. If anybody has any comments, I'll read them. Commentary here. Shantideva is again reminding us to be gentle with ourselves. He says that if austerities and pain were what it took to be enlightened, we'd already be enlightened. We have all suffered in our current lives. The hardships that we experience on the Bodhisattva path are temporary. Bhima refers to it as taking a small amount of bitter medicine to ward off a life-threatening disease. The Buddha taught moderation and relaxation and rejected the austerities commonly practiced in India at the time. Our practice is non-aggressive. Catching ourselves when our mind wanders, we return to this fleeting, ungraspable moment. The Buddha taught a gradual path, starting where we are, which may be giving food or small change, whatever will stretch us a bit. We can visualize giving away a cherished possession or doing a practice like just like me. The just like me practice is the one that we talked about a little bit before, is understanding there are, whatever you're feeling, there are millions of people out there feeling the same thing right now, just like me. That's the just like me practice. I didn't draw it out in here. As we practice, we will gradually be able to do more and more challenging situations. This happens naturally if our practice feels like too much or feels harsh. We can lighten up and be more gentle with ourselves. Being able to see ourselves with humor rather than just negative criticism. We don't have to force things to happen. Our ability to do more will grow naturally in increasingly challenging situations. Sometimes bodhisattvas need to back off a bit. not giving up, but discovering what they can do with enthusiasm. What's too tight or too loose, that which causes benefit and that which causes harm. Pima suggests that we bring enthusiasm to the things that we can do and not worry too much about the future. Gentleness is the key to our progress on the path. Pelton tells us that where the practice can lead us, gradually, as we acquire the habit, we will be able to give more and more. When we have realized the natural equality of all phenomena, gold and clods of earth will be of equal value to us. Space and the palm of our hands will be the same. All will be equal, both good and bad. We will understand the dreamlike quality of all phenomena, and we will be free from every fear. The one thing I will comment about Pelton, a lot of what Pelton says in his commentary is much more talking about someone who is already a Buddha. So when, what he's talking about here is if we follow this path, these are the things that will happen for us. I'd be curious just to ask, one of the things he says here is start small. And as you go along and things are more challenging, you will find it easier to do some of the things on the path. Is that an experience that people are having? Do you feel like, as you've been sitting and studying, some of this stuff works? Sometimes I can look at something and see it in a different light and be more critical. Sometimes I can see how crazy, can you see how crazy the world is going on at this point? But then find the still point inside of yourself. In spite of the craziness, in spite of the difficulty of the situation, is there a place you can go to in yourself? Not always, sometimes. Are these things that are happening with your practice? Personally, I can say, yeah. I mean, are they huge? No, it is exactly what he says. It is, a half a step at a time. What you see, and then what you learn from before, and then you build on that. Well, I do feel that. And I certainly, based on practice at this point, can say that every once in a while I'm surprised by being able to be centered when there's a lot of chaos going on around me. So hopefully you're seeing some of that in your practice too. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Two things about that. So this morning when I left, I told my wife I'm going to do some Tonglen for her because she's struggling at work right now. And she says, thank you. And she says, push out the jive, bring in the love, which is from The Simpsons. Monty Burns is like, this guru. So sitting here, I was push out the jive, bring in the love, right? Doing that. So interesting that the connection to Tonglen. And second, the humor, right? The sort of not taking things too seriously. And something that Chris said last year sometime when I think it was after my first marathon, Zazenkai. And it was like I was saying, it's what drew me to Buddhism was that it's very simple and elegant and it makes sense. The easiest thing that I've ever been able to understand. but at the same time, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Yes.
And Chris said, maybe you shouldn't try so hard, right? I was like, ding, ding. So sitting here after I was doing some Tonglen, then going back into Shikantaza and just sitting and silent illumination, just sitting there and had this sudden realization that we're a bunch of people sitting in this room facing the wall in complete silence. And if an outsider came in and looked in, they would be like, what the hell is going on? I mean, it struck me at that moment as just being so, not absurd or comical, but just so funny that, I had to laugh. And that moment of joy, it was just like, very refreshing. Yeah.
And if you don't understand, it is absurd.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to what? I'm going to go sit for a half hour and face the wall.
Well, a bunch of other people doing the same thing.
Yeah, with a bunch of other people. And well, what are you going to think about? Nothing. What's your goal? No goal.
What's it good for?
Yeah.
So, no, thanks for that. I think that's one of the things. One of the ways when I first came to this group, one of the things that made me stay, it was called Juju at that point, but one of the things that kept me coming back every time was how much we laughed. We laughed all the time. And it was like, this is human. This is, we can look at ourselves and laugh as seriously as we take all of this and as seriously as it is. And it got me engaged with the group. And no, that's not bad. It's been 12 years now that I've been here with this group. So I wish you all the same. I wish you all the same. Any other comments? Any other thoughts? Okay. Let's take a look at that. Verses 27 to 34. Sin has been abandoned. Thus, there is no pain. Though having wisdom, there is no more sorrow. Or, I'm sorry, through having wisdom, there is no sorrow. For so it is that mind and body, both, are injured by false views and sinfulness. Merit is the true cause of the body's ease, while happiness of mind is had through understanding. What can sadden those who have compassion, who remain within samsara for the sake of beings? For through their powers of bodhicitta, former sins are totally consumed, and merit, ocean vast, is gathered in. It's therefore said that they excel the Shravakas. Mounted on the horse of bodhicitta, which puts to flight all mournful weariness, what lucid person could be in despair, proceeding in this way from joy to joy? The forces that secure the good of beings are aspiration, steadfastness, relinquishment, and joy. Aspiration grows through fear of suffering and contemplation of benefits to be obtained. Therefore, leaving everything that is adverse to it, I'll labor to increase my diligence, through aspiration and self-confidence, relinquishment and joy, by strength of earnest application and exertion of control. The boundless evils of myself and others, I must bring them all to nothing. Even though a single of these ills may take unnumbered ages to exhaust. And if I find within myself no sign that faults are even starting to be cleansed, why does my heart not burst asunder, destined as I am for boundless pain? Okay. So the commentary here says, Shantideva here is pointing out two major causes of our suffering, creating negative karma and a closed, unskillful mind. With even a small understanding of cause and effect, we can see that the worst harm we can cause to ourselves is to hurt others. A closed, unskillful mind is one that fixates, compartmentalizes, and conceptualizes. It contains solid ideas about self and other, and fixed ideas about what is acceptable and what isn't. It is incapable of seeing things without bias. The true nature of all phenomena cannot be seen. If our mind is free of prejudice and self-righteousness, we no longer act out of aggression or the other habits that cause us suffering. Our mind becomes naturally flexible and open, and we experience freedom. Even understanding karma and false views intellectually, we are more eager to loosen their destructive power. Pelton again tells us where the practice can take us, saying, although bodhisattvas remain intentionally in samsara, they are not stained by its defects. They have understood that the nature of all knowable phenomena is the absence of self, and therefore their minds are totally free of sorrow. Again, his use of bodhisattva here is clearly that of a Buddha who has attained enlightenment, as opposed to our current use of the word. Shantideva then gives us three causes for happiness. The first is merit. The positive consequences of our wise and skillful actions, the positive results of letting go. When we lead saner, more compassionate lives, we will be more likely to incorporate whatever life disasters that come our way into our path of awakening. Excuse me. The second source of happiness comes from training our mind. The more we let go of fixed ideas and open ourselves to others, the happier we become. And the third source of happiness is the choice to remain in samsara for the benefit of all beings, choosing to incorporate samsara's challenges into our path of awakening. Shantideva then points out the difference between a Shravaka and a Bodhisattva. Starting from the Buddha's message of liberation from suffering, the Shravaka's goal is utter cessation of suffering and peace. On the other hand, the Bodhisattva constantly prepares to relate fearlessly to the pain, and the greater the suffering, the greater the need to go there. Pema points out that this needs to be balanced with our current abilities and reminds us that starting with relatively small day-to-day challenges, he leads to developing our courage to handle more challenging things in the future. There are 4 strengths that support our enthusiasm for benefiting others: aspiration, firmness, joy, and moderation. Aspiration is a genuine, deep yearning to free ourselves from obstructions so that we can better alleviate the suffering of other people. Reaffirming our Bodhisattva intention in this way becomes increasingly meaningful and supportive. Shantideva tells us that the source of aspiration is the fear of suffering. That is, fear of the consequences of giving in to our habitual reactions, as well as becoming clear about the positive effects of not getting swept away by our thoughts and emotions. Without commenting on the other 3 strengths at this point, Shantideva joyfully aspires to leave laziness behind and eagerly go forward, using the 4 strengths as well as cheerfulness, keenness, and self-control, saying that these emanate from his understanding karma and the benefits of liberation. In the last verse of this section, Shantideva says that no matter how impossible this great enterprise may seem, he won't be discouraged. He then questions who he is to make such a statement. We ultimately see that his self-doubts will not keep him from his vow. He is motivated by the fact that every one of us has the potential to awaken and is willing to encourage all of us forever. Our true nature is a precious jewel, and even if it is buried in mud at this point, it is completely unaffected and brilliant. Shantideva will uncover his jewel-like nature to help others do the same. He then says that he spent too much time thinking of himself rather than focused on the sublime Dharma. And as a result, his virtue is lacking. He then says that right now he can aspire to open his heart and reach out. The Buddha has said that aspiration to the sacred Dharma is the root of every virtue. Pelton then says, we should not be like a dog on the roof, constantly looking down, but rather like a bird on the ground, constantly looking up. Learning how to observe the discipline, receive, reflect, and meditate on the teachings, we will gain happiness and progress on the path. If our intentions and corresponding actions are wholesome, the merit of virtue accomplished in the past will offer its fully ripened fruit, an abundance of happiness and good qualities. When we cultivate the Bodhi heart, we encourage a sympathetic world no matter where we turn. We also come to realize that all suffering of this and future lives does not derive from wicked people, but from our own negative behavior. And if we do evil in our quest for satisfaction, misery will cut us down and destroy us. The effect of one's actions must all be experienced. They do not fade away or disappear. And having confidence in the principle of karmic cause and effect, we will abandon negative actions and aspire and tend exclusively to virtue by means of keen and focused interest. Shantideva has given us the facts and presented his case. Now the choice is up to us. After verse 46, Pima quotes the Vajra. Never mind. I won't say the name of the sutra. I can't say it. With the analogy that just as the sun illuminates the whole earth without bias, the Bodhisattva is willing to work with anyone, no matter how ordinary. So, that's all I have for today. Any more thoughts? I find it interesting, the two commentaries, because I believe Pema Chodron's commentary starts with the idea of the Bodhisattva as we understand the Bodhisattva today. Paladin much more looks at the Bodhisattva as an enlightened Buddha already. So while Pima teaches us how to go slowly, be gentle with ourselves, look, and to balance things out, Pelton at the same time is kind of saying, all right, and if you do these things, this is where it goes to. This is what you can accomplish. Essentially, you too can become Buddha. It's been, as I've gone between the two, it took me a while to kind of figure out how the two commentaries sort of balance each other out. But that's the one thought as I'm reading, going back and forth between the commentaries. So that's what I got. Chris.
A couple thoughts. One was going back to your question about how does practice change us? And, there's certain things that we might notice about ourselves or whatever, but I like the idea of, that our practice is attraction, not promotion. So, we were talking earlier about, going out and recruiting other Buddhists, which we don't really do, but we attract them because, we are living more peaceful lives or whatever. So the idea is that other people around us can notice the effect that our practice is having on us. And one of my favorite Buddhist quotes is that idea of, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. That's where the rub is. And the other thought that I had is just, some things are just more accessible to me than other things. And I find Shantideva a little challenging because of all the emphasis on, sin and, hell and some of these other things. But also a little bit about, I'm a little bit turned off or whatever by the idea of achieving Buddhahood or achieving enlightenment. And we've talked about this before. Zen teaches us that we're already enlightened, that we already, that we have Buddha nature. It's there. It's not something we're trying to attain or achieve. And every time that we sit down, every time that we sit, or every time that we do some compassionate action, every time that we have a new awareness or experience awareness, we're there. We're there in that moment. So it's not something that we're working to achieve. which I think is a little different than some of the concepts here. I think that was it. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. The one thing he does mention, of course, is the jewel that's hidden in the mud.
Yeah.
And it's fine as it is. It's there already. You just got to uncover it.
Oh, that was the other thing. And again, this is just my own
Yeah,
limited
yeah,
interpretation
that's
of
what we're
things,
talking.
but sometimes when he's talking about these various virtues and developing this and developing that in our practice, I think it's the cart before the horse, so to speak, in the sense that the more that we sit, the more Buddha-like we become. And it's not that we don't strive or work on ourselves or whatever. It's just that I think it's a more organic, natural process that occurs. And either slowly or suddenly or both. It's not something that we're doing. So I understand, and the answer is probably somewhere in the middle ground. We need to put some effort for it, but
you're
it's
not doing it either.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's classic Zen.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't want to ignore the part where the change is occurring because of our setting practice.
I think it's a real good juxtaposition of these two ideas where we talk about, if you are sitting zazen and that if you have bodhicitta and you are trying to embrace the practice, that both the paramitas and the precepts come naturally. It's not like, but they do and they don't. I mean, we're talking about diligence. You have to have the diligence to put them into practice, and yet if you focus too hard on them, you're headed the wrong way. And that's that middle, it's the middle way. And certainly, one of the good example of that is the descriptions I've seen of meditation, where one master says, it's the seat of ease, just relax back into meditation. And then you read another master that says, you should be sweating, and that it's this, the meditation should be this intense effort. Which is right. Well, probably both and neither. I mean, it's what's right for you. It's what helps you. It's what you find moves you the direction you want to go. And there's times when I've sweated, and there's times when I'm easy. So, no, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Definitely sweating at 4:30 during the Zazen Kai when we've been sitting all day. Or it's my turn to be the timekeeper, and I'm sitting over there next to Jill, and I'm self-conscious because I'm like trying to do the time, and like I don't want to disturb her, and I'm sweating, and I'm like freaking out about the time, and just like, just time is time. It'll happen. And I'm worried. I'm worried that the timer is the battery in the timer is going to fail when I'm keeping time, and 40 minutes have gone by, and everyone is around sitting like, hello, we're way past time. So.
So, and I'm sure you look at those as obstructions, right?
And just let them go.
Let them go. If it was only so simple.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Just thinking a little bit about what Chris was talking about, and I can take off the Zen hat for a minute, put on the sociology hat. I think it helps a little bit to know, I think, some of the cultural and historical realities too that inform a lot of that. So, I mean, India at the time of Buddha, and certainly even up into the development of the early Mahayana and Shantideva, is a bad place to be. And so this emphasis really on like having to escape from samsara and life sucks, it's bad, I don't want to be here, informs a lot of that. Whereas, and so you have an interesting movement then with the Mahayana that's like, yeah, it's terrible, but we're going to stay here and help everybody out too. But there's still that weight of that kind of negative sense about life that I think is there. Whereas by the time it moves to China and Chinese culture, their outlook on life is a little bit more positive. And so by the time that you get to this in development, it's well, samsara and nirvana are the same, because the mindset is, well, this life isn't actually so bad. And we can become enlightened just by being kind of fully immersed in it. Up into the further developments with modern teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, who's like, well, life is a miracle. And it's easy to see those things as disconnected, but it's also easy to see how people's just historical and cultural context affects a lot of. And of course, and that's not to say that, I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh lived through the Vietnam War and was acting as a field medic, and so, I mean, it's not that he had no real suffering in his life either, but sometimes that can be lost, and particularly, coming from like a evangelical background in my youth, at 10 years in Eastern Orthodoxy, I'm reading this early portion and going, this sounds like my prayer books, like this is so negative and so self-loathing, and so I understand why that's like triggering. But I do think that the tonal shifts are really interesting, and it kind of keeps going back to this hopeful outlook of just like, saying, yeah, it's a gradual process. It can take lifetimes, but like, don't sweat it so much. Like, it can get better. So I wonder how much, especially with recent changes, that some of these older texts might benefit us somewhat as things start to look a little bleak again. It might be worthwhile to revisit that a little bit. Yeah, we maybe need to have a little bit of this, like it resonates more as we're kind of like, oh yeah, things are bad now, but everything changes, nothing's permanent. So
Yeah, thank you for that. John.
As I was staring at the title of this book, I'm sure the publisher gave this book the name The Way of the Bodhisattva, because this was just, a talk that Shantideva gave hundreds of years ago. There's the definite article there, The Way of the Bodhisattva. But this was his path.
Mm-hmm.
And, the idea of skillful means that, the path to enlightenment is manifold and unique for each individual, or at least potentially unique for each individual. So I think also coming from an evangelical background, everything was like it's either true or it's false, and it's very easy to be like, well, this doesn't resonate with me, it's garbage. But in reality, we can take the insights that we see along our path,
Mm-hmm.
and the other ones, we're working through them here, right? And we can make a determination as to what we keep and what we let go of.
you're saying a way versus the way, right? A way of the Bodhisattva.
Yeah.
Dharma gates being endless and all of that.
It would probably sell fewer copies if it was just
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah, publisher does. So this is it. You gotta buy it. You're missing out.
Yeah, I actually am I'd be curious to ask Pete about this. I actually think that is the name of the sutra, the way of the Bodhisattva.
Oh, really?
That wasn't a publisher thing. And my understanding is that's the name of the original text. I may be wrong about that, but
No, it's in the introduction, but it's one of those long multisyllabic
Yeah,
Indic
yeah.
words that's hard to pronounce.
and depends on. Actually, it may not have been the publisher; it may have been the translator.
Well, this page says a translation of the Bodhisattva. So I imagine however that gets translated is what it is. But I'm sure the monks, they catalog things. I still don't think Shantideva said and this is the way of the Bodhisattva. So it was given probably after the fact.
Well, I think, I mean, we pretty much see that all the time. That this is, interestingly enough, the short quote, I think I put it in from Dean, that I walk my path with all beings. He said that in one of his recent, and it just struck me that it's something, it is this dichotomy between you study the self, but then you find out it's not there. That's where we are in Zen. But obviously, you're there. I see you. And yet, is that a self? What's a self? What? Each of us has to find our own path, and it's a path that's individual, but also universal, that contains all of us and everything and everyone.
There are voices in the chorus, right? Because we practice the forms, right? We
Yeah.
recite the Heart Sutra, the robe chant, right? That is chanted in Zendos and Zen centers all over, right? With various translations.
Mhm.
But we're using the same forms that have been used for hundreds of years, right? But it's our voice adds to the chorus of voices so that it becomes singular and universal simultaneously. And that simultaneity is the sort of the magic of it, I think. And again, going back to the context of when this was written, right? Maybe, and I, again, trying to like place the timeline, I'm guessing there wasn't this strong emphasis on the individual journey that arose out of Western Renaissance and, the sort of 20th century philosophers, about the self and about, our place in society. It was a very structured culture, and something like this was an antidote, right? So it kind of had to be prescriptive in some ways because he was laying down the law in some ways. Like, okay, suffering, right? The truth of suffering, here's the path on how to liberate yourself and other beings from that. So in a way, by laying down this sort of pathway, some of it has to be programmatic and prescriptive. Whereas now, today, because of our Western upbringing, we have this very strong sense of individual agency. And so it's been filtered and interpreted in contemporary ways to be like, okay, we have our own path through this very traditional, very structured, very universal practice. So I think that friction is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's basically where we live in Zen. It is what Rannigan refers to as the knife edge. Yeah. Joe.
And I frequently try to put it in Zen perspective while we're thinking about it. And I find that it's very, it's a religious approach. It's very two-world, very dualistic, very linear kind of thinking, as opposed to Zen, being here now in the moment, interconnected with all things, and letting go of self. And this is all about the self, it seems to me. It's my take on it, anyhow.
Erin.
That kind of touches something my mind has been circling around listening to everyone, which is, I feel like one of the things, and Chris kind of mentioned this, I think, too, but I feel like in, I guess, Soto Zen specifically, which is what I'm usually practicing, like, there isn't this emphasis on like personal achievement or like really like enlightenment being something that you get to and experience. And it's also, in my understanding, it hasn't been a way of like escaping suffering, kind of going back to what you were talking about with the context that this was actually written from, but more so that like we are becoming more connected to reality and being with reality and understanding our reality of being in relation with everything. And so I feel like that is maybe like where the disconnect is happening between like reading something from this time and then sort of like the Soto Zen perspective as I've kind of been absorbing it like through here and through Ben Connolly, which is more like that like enlightenment is always here, it's always available to everyone, and that like the way that we access it is by like being with all other beings and responding to them versus like I need to get the hell out of here get the hell out of this actual hell and like transcend reality by going somewhere else, kind of. So I feel like that for me is like maybe part of the disconnect that we're feeling reading
because
this.
the key issue is reality isn't somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's right here.
Yeah.
It's right here. And it's right here. And it's right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I've heard Ben Connolly talk about Mahayana Buddhism. Like it means the great vehicle.
Correct.
And it's the great vehicle because it's supposed to be big enough to get everyone to liberation. And so I feel like this is like a very early Mahayana text, right?
It is.
And so I feel like there's maybe like a cultural limitation to, because it's just like starting to happen. So it's like, it's the same thing as like looking at like, different contexts of like Catholicism or something, like there's a lot of things that could be, especially early on, extremely different from, I don't know, like being at a Catholic worker house in a urban community in America or something.
You're working out the kinks.
Well, I thought about your example, and it's kind of like, I want you to go to my house from here. Okay. How do you get there? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Where is it at? Well, I'm not going to tell you. I mean, you've got to you have to have a roadmap at least to get to where you're going. And I think you're right. This is a lot of these older things. We're putting those roadmaps down. And and Zen clearly has evolved over time, and that's what can make it difficult sometimes to read some of the sutras, and you kind of go, ah. But understanding where that was and how it came about. Some of our recent studies with the people that we name in the service, we name Dongsha. These were people who were developing the ideas of Zen. And it's only really in the last year or two that I've come to understand how that works, how one led to the other to the next, and that and how those guys led to Dogen and to practice enlightenment, even though they sort of hinted at it. But it was definitely Dogen's idea when he got there. So, anything else? Well, I hope I've hit the middle way and I'm not going on an arrow to hell.
Let's hope not.
My eyebrows falling out. So hopefully we've done okay.
So far, you still have eyebrows.
So turned out to may our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Good. Bye, everybody, for today, and Dean will be back on Thursday.
All right. Thank you, John.
You are welcome.